Nietzsche's illness was to become a major turning point in his life, both physically and philosophically. In 1876, at the opening of Wagner's great opera house at Bayreuth, Nietzsche left after the first act of The Ring, suffering from a mysterious illness. His relationship with Wagner was already under serious strain due to Nietzsche's objection to the composer's growing nationalism. Walking out on The Ring was the last straw.
At Bayreuth, Nietzsche felt literally nauseated, and that nausea was both a turning point and a symbol. I mean, it was clearly a physical symptom which was expressive of a psychological state. He couldn't stomach the spuriousness of the enthusiasm, the kind of reverence that Wagner was commanding and reveling in. It sickened him literally. He had to leave. The break with Wagner had become inevitable. You can't say, terribly sorry, maestro, I wasn't feeling well. Wagner was not someone who would forgive something like that.
His health really was deteriorating, and I think he needed a philosophy, his own philosophy, to cope with his life, to cope with his problems. And the Schopenhauer and Wagner way, the momentary way out in music, that wasn't enough for him anymore.
It was during the years of my lowest vitality that I ceased to be a pessimist. The instinct of self-restoration forbade me a philosophy of poverty and discouragement. This, in fact, is how that long period of sickness appears to me now. As it were, I discovered life anew, including myself. I turned my will to health, to life, into a philosophy, into the will to power.
He says somewhere that you yourselves are this will to power. And I think Nietzsche thought that ultimately the task was one of self-mastery, that is, of acquiring a certain kind of self-knowledge that would not be merely intellectual or abstract, because for Nietzsche all knowledge is ultimately rooted in the body. So for him, self-mastery involves acquiring as much knowledge as is possible about the human body, about your body, about its physiology, about its psychology.
He felt that one of the great influences of Christianity was to banish the body from culture. He suggested that perhaps the whole of Western philosophy has been a misunderstanding of the body. And his view was that our physical nature and our psychological nature has ultimate bearing on the way we think. And the phrase the will to power, die Wille zur Macht in German, I think can be read in terms of this idea of self-making. And what we might see as part of his legacy in the 20th century is the institutionalizing of self-making as therapy. And I think that that's a pioneering aspect of his work, and it leads on to Freud. I mean, arguably, without Nietzsche, there wouldn't be Freud.
Nietzsche's new philosophy resulted in the publication of Human, All Too Human, subtitled A Book for Free Spirits. Begun in the solitude of the Swiss countryside, it was as much a work of psychology as philosophy. It was Nietzsche's first great statement of individualism and challenged mankind to think for itself. He wrote it in short aphoristic bursts while out walking, a method of working he would continue for the rest of his life.
And so onwards, along a path of wisdom, with a hearty tread, a hearty confidence. However you may be your own source of experience. Throw off your discontent about your nature. Forgive yourself, your own self. You have it in your power to merge everything you have lived through, false starts, errors, delusions, passions, your loves and your hopes, into your goal, with nothing left over.
He had freed himself from the fetters of ancient traditions and of opinions which were not his. And free spirit to him means to be willing and to be able and to dare to have a fresh look out, to question one's own opinions all the time, and to be open-minded enough to find one's own way.
From Human All Too Human onwards, Nietzsche is effectively sending himself out into the wilderness. He's very aware that the book is a controversial one. He's very aware that by publishing it in 1878, he's going to cut himself off from a lot of the friends that he's had so far. Wagner himself saw the book as evidence already of Nietzsche's mental instability. And Nietzsche, therefore, found himself increasingly isolated. He's conceiving of himself as a sort of heroic wanderer figure heading out up mountains and into new territory.
A year after the publication of Human, All Too Human, Nietzsche resigned his professorship at Basel due to ill health and moved to the Engadine region of the Swiss Alps. Living off a small pension, he found himself a room in this boarding house in the village of Sils Maria. For the next 10 years, he would spend the summers here, and the winters either on the French or Italian Riviera, moving as the climate changed to suit his health.
He loved the clean, rarefied air and the coolness in summer. This seemed to be his kind of climate. He felt that he could think clearer. He found what he was looking for in his prose, really, the kind of... he used the imagery. He was looking for something very hard and not susceptible to emotion, to human emotion. So what he found in the mountains was a picture of a world where human emotion was trivial.
Philosophy, as I have so far understood and lived it, means living voluntarily among ice and high mountains, seeking out everything strange and questionable in existence, everything so far placed under a ban by morality. The ice is near, the solitude tremendous, but how serenely all things lie in the light, how freely one breathes, how much one feels lies beneath oneself.
In 1882, while travelling in Italy, the old hermit of Sils Maria, as Nietzsche called himself, met the one and only romantic love of his life, Lou Andreas Salome, a brilliant young student. Though only 20 years old, Nietzsche described her as being as shrewd as an eagle and as brave as a lion, and considered her to be his philosophical protégé. They were introduced by his friend, the psychologist Paul Ray, and throughout the course of that year, the three of them were inseparable. They travelled round Italy together, living as free spirits.